Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Max Bielohurov. Max is the co-founder and CTO of Diasphere, a BIM and VDC services company, helping to bridge the gap between MEP design and construction reality. As a leader in the industry, he brings over a decade of experience overseeing projects ranging from large-scale commercial developments to multifamily builds. Max blends deep engineering expertise with strong managerial acumen, having led multidisciplinary teams through all phases of the BIM workflow and completed over 100 projects across both the U.S. and international markets. Welcome to the show, Max. I want to start by kind of hearing your origin story of how you got into this industry to begin with.
Gotcha. Yeah. Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me today. That's really great to be there. So the story how I got into the industry. So it actually started back when I was a kid, literally. So I was very much a fan of doing Lego blocks, how banal it sounds, but it was my case. Sometimes I would actually watch like Discovery Channel, how they would do like this huge construction projects. And I would try to mimic something from the Lego blocks. And it actually started when I was like 5-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And this actually created a type of mind for me that I had a good awareness of 3D environment. It was a no-brainer for me that I wanted to become an engineer. So that's how I started. So that's how I got into civil engineering. That was it. And when I was at the third grade of my university, I actually joined the company, the BIM company. I initially started as a drafter, I climbed to a BIM manager. And after working there like for 5 years, I actually co-founded Diasphere, where I'm currently at. And as of right now, so being with Diasphere for 5 years, currently I'm fulfilling a role of a CTO right now, which aligns with like my focus for now to keep things smoothly running for our customers on the technical side of the job. So that's literally my journey from childhood to now.
Yeah.
And yeah, in total in the industry, I've been for like 10 years now.
Awesome. Yeah, very cool. I love the Lego connection of sparking that love and interest of building and seeing how things put together. I have several young kids, and I get the joy of going back and having an excuse to play with all the Legos and everything. It's so much fun. I loved Legos as a kid too.
Yeah, that's really true. I can't imagine how many engineers actually got into the field because of that.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It has to be a bunch of people. Who doesn't like playing with Legos? It's so satisfying there. So what I want to sit on and kind of unpack is the whole world of BIM, which obviously has been around for a long time, a decade plus here in the industry and picking up more steam. But what is interesting is everybody's kind of perception of what BIM is and the intricacies and kind of what it involves. So I'd love to kind of set the table for us from your vantage point. What is BIM done right? What does that mean?
Yeah. So this is a great one. I have my entire career of 10 years. It's been in BIM since the very beginning. The BIM done right, actually, like contradiction that I see a lot is how things start at the beginning and how they actually develop along the life cycle of the project. And in majority of the cases, there is very good plan at the beginning and everyone seems to agree to it at first. But eventually, as I would say, rubber hits the road, when the actual construction delays and variables start to get into the process, since BIM is actually, it cannot live without being attached to the actual construction. This is basically what it serves. So that's like an enabling technology. And oftentimes that's when the things everyone agreed to at the beginning start to fail. And it can be like minor things from people starting to label things differently and it's hard to find them anymore. And this could be something to people forgetting to QC for the crucial parts that were initially agreed at the beginning, but they just slip through the cracks as the team evolves, as there are new people getting on board. More and more RFIs and questions remain unresolved. So that's like the progression that I've seen. And BIM done right in this context would be to, in my understanding, like based on my experience, I would say to keep things simple is the very important thing in this regard, since it would actually mean that everyone is on the same page about what processes to follow, what workflows to stick to do the BIM right. You need to keep it simple from the very beginning and always keep like aligning with the other parties every step of the way.
Yeah. So a ton to unpack there. Where I want to start is with standardization. It seems to be one of the biggest challenges when it comes to BIM is finding that balance between having, set structured workflows and then having the flexibility that the project team needs as stuff happens on the job site and you have to be agile and adapt. How do you recommend organizations really approaching that tension between the structured workflows and that agility?
Right. So getting back to what I said, so to keep things simple, to put it into perspective, so let's talk about the BIM execution plans, for example. So I've seen, I would say, two like different sides of how it can begin from the BIM for the BIM execution plan. You can have a sort of like 30 plus pages long document which would describe like terms like what CDE is, what BIM is. And you can have on the other side, you can have like 4 pages document, which would basically enlist the focus points for the team to work on and what the actual goal from the BIM is. And in this context, I've seen that the most successful projects are those that keep the BIM execution plan like short and focused. That actually just helps to have the team working only on important, crucial parts. And these are oftentimes the QC like guidelines and important things like whether to include clearances or not, for which equipment to include that. Maybe it can be important for the owner on this particular project to focus on specific rooms in the job. And it's better to be mentioned in the BIM execution plan, since for sure this would typically be all mentioned in the specifications. And this is a very important part for the BIM team to also dive into that. Since BIM teams often work on the virtual construction side, I would say, virtual part of the project, they typically focus on getting the models up and they forget about some of the smaller details, which is where BIM execution plan highlighting that would actually be very helpful, instead of the one that would just explain for the BIM team what the BIM is, what the CDE is.
Yeah, no, makes sense. Another kind of complication is, or reality, when you're talking about a construction project, there's obviously lots of different stakeholders involved. So you can have several different levels of BIM maturity that is working together on the team. How do you bring everybody up on the same page without slowing the progress down?
That's the same old communication. So I'll just explain one of the case studies, like one of the projects that we did in the past. So it was a university building, this like science campus, and it was pretty heavy on the mechanical installation parts. There's been like plenty of systems, and there has been several trades working on this job. And the tricky part was they did not have any experience with BIM before, and we had to bring them into this world. I can explain it like that. And how we did that is arranging a lot of communication at the very beginning. We had to, in addition to regular like weekly calls, we established daily calls with each of the contractor. At the very beginning, it was like necessary to do it that way. So we just brought them up to speed with at the beginning with our question. So what we need as a BIM team to actually from them to deliver the good model. So it started with communication, and we also used the like checklist from our end that we created, because it just proved to be a very good way to share what we need to them, instead of just discussing that on the call and maybe like doing any like meeting memos. We created a shared online document where we like listed all of the requirements that we had after we analyzed the specs. By then, we did not have much submittals at the very beginning. So it was all listed in this spreadsheet. And we actually just guided these trades how to use the spreadsheet and explain what questions are there, why we need them answered. And this can be anything from if we found any contradictions in the specs about the spacing for the hangers, we would highlight that there's the contradiction because like different types of materials require different spacing. And we would separate this as the separate questions, which the main concern here was that those who never dealt with BIM, they typically do not realize that this is like we cannot work without the information about how it's going to be installed at the end, because we are doing virtual construction. And that was the struggle for us to actually prove to these contractors why we need these questions answered. They were like, we don't know, it's not time yet. And we're like, then in this case, let's agree on some common assumption. That would be like common sense assumption, how we would typically approach it. And we will just mark it as something that's going to be changing. And that's how we started. So it's been like a lot of communication where we just had to get as much information from them at the very early stage of the project.
Yeah. I love the open lines of communications and the transparency to bring them into the process early. I think that's for sure needed. How do you go about getting buy-in from those that may not naturally be inclined to embracing that kind of digital workflow?
Yeah. That's a good point. So it's about finding common like backgrounds. And you gotta understand the background of the other party very well. Start with some ice breaking. Ask about their past projects, for example. They might share it. Oftentimes people want to relate to their experience, and when they like if they have not dealt with like building information modeling before, they may just be like feel like alienated when you're trying to just throw BIM terms at them and all of that. So you got to be probably humble about that and considering the background of the party that you're talking to, because oftentimes people who are in construction just don't buy into the process, not because they are, say, lazy or just hard. They simply do not understand what you want, and they feel that it's not worth discussing at this point. So you gotta start with some ice breaking and relating more to the construction side of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, especially in construction, to deliver the why behind what you're asking and what you're doing, because as soon as they understand, this isn't just busy work or a random question, but it has a purpose and it has a reason that's going to benefit them, then they're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Here's the answer.
Right.
And they're willing to play ball right now. If they think that you're just giving them, a stupid question or busy work, then why? What motivation do they have to actually answer the question?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And
so one of the things you brought up at the beginning was kind of where that the rubber hits the road aspect of it. So it's one thing to have a great model and standards on paper, but the real test is how that translates to once it starts happening on the field and in the job site. How do you ensure the intent of the model actually shows up in the practical day-to-day work on the job site?
That there are some like painful experiences we had with that as well, which I'll share later. The important part of getting things done right in the field is to involve guys from the field at the very beginning, or as soon as you can get them on board. So we approach this by initiating intermediate reviews of the model and the drawings with the actual superintendents. So this is something that is hard to do because of that like buy-in thing that we discussed. And as soon as construction starts, superintendents are typically very busy doing the actual construction. And it's important to find the proper time, I would say, for the first contact for them. Maybe give a call to the superintendent and actually start a conversation with him to begin with. And then it's a matter of keeping feedback from the field team running to the BIM production team. That's the only thing that can actually ensure that things working. The painful experience that I mentioned was we had a project where everything was good. When we delivered the drawing, we communicated the requirements with the project manager. He liked it very much. it was good, and we delivered the drawing, asked for the feedback. The BIM manager said all good. And when we got to the construction site, when we visited that, actually, it turned out that field team decided not to use part of these drawings and never said this to anyone. They just decided they want to build it the old way, even though the BIM manager was sure that it was good because he has seen them printed on site, but they were never used. And we were like, okay, guys, this is cool that you can build it without it, but it basically means that there's been some wasted resource on both sides. So someone spent time on your end communicating the requirements to us, approving these drawings, but we never got feedback that you did not like some aspect of it, for instance, or the actual end user, they just did not have the intention to use it. And this is something that we kind of realized that you need to be persistent in getting feedback from the field team itself. Because project managers can be thinking in terms of different metrics.
Sure.
Field team thinks that they want the drawing to be clear, readable, and sometimes capturing their own installation preferences, which is an important thing. Because if they want to install a certain part of the job specifically because of the tools they have, and maybe they have some preferences on their end, which were not communicated to the BIM team, the model can look very nice, but this will be not usable, and field team will not trust it. They will just do it the way that they're used to.
Any lesson learned on how to go about that persistence to get the feedback in on time and really get valuable feedback in to adapt the model?
Typically, it's just show up to the construction site.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the industry, construction is very concrete. So you have to be present there, just maybe show up face to face, make some handshakes. So people actually memorized you, not as some talking face on the screen, but as the actual human who is interested in getting the job built and completed. So that would be the lessons learned.
Yeah, I think so much of life is just simply showing up, no matter what it is. Do you see any communication gaps that are often missed or overlooked between the teams, whether between design to construction or the owners, and how do you be proactive to address those?
That would, in our experience, this would relate to do very thorough analysis at the beginning of the job. So you got to collect all the information that you have on the design and actually go through it line by line, make sure that you've captured all the requirements from the specs. So I in building information modeling stands for information. So you got to master the information in the project that's available. And by having the tracked log of this information as a checklist, so that's something that I mentioned at the beginning, you will be able to just making sure that that's the most proactive thing you can do in this regard. So collect everything in a structured list at the very beginning, highlight any inconsistencies, and then just follow up on the regular basis as to the things that were not clarified and uncovered. Because the things like changes that have been discussed or sudden changes, sometimes you just can't predict those. Typically, these kind of changes are missed in communication between the parties, and they usually lead to change orders and this missing things. For instance, owner has decided to change, I don't know, the upper floor for some reason, throw in more residential units than he wanted, or change the layouts. And he would initially, just because of how projects are set up, he would discuss it only with the architect. And he might actually, even though he knows about that, he wouldn't share it down the line just because it's not decided yet. So this kind of changes I find the most impactful. And you cannot do anything about those. You just gotta have some margin on your end to allow for these changes to happen. So this would, I slightly shifted from the initial question. So you were mentioned about the communication gaps. So just to reiterate, so analyze all the inputs that you have, structure them in a way that you will be able to follow up until you have everything clarified. And that would be the most proactive thing you can do based on our experience.
Yeah. Interesting. Makes a ton of sense there. So kind of zooming out and looking ahead over the next few years, where do you think the biggest opportunity lies to elevate the industry's approach when it comes to BIM and coordination?
In my understanding right now, it is the making sure that field teams are more connected with the beam production teams. That's where I see the most, like, the gap within the industry. There are still a lot of companies that can build things very well, but they do not use beam, and it's like this gap between them that makes the industry just not very good at adopting beam. And in order to solve this, in my understanding, there should be some platform that would actually combine beam production more naturally into the construction workflows. So that's my view right now. And
Yeah.
probably some AI things would help combine all the different software that exists on the market, because you can see there is different CDE or like file storage options available. There are different platforms to manage clash detection, and it can just boil down to the fact that different projects will use something different, and
Hmm.
it's hard for the teams to just be up to speed with all of that. And probably having some centralized platform, maybe through the use of APIs or some AI augmentation, would actually help make a central hub for all the information on the project, both the construction and beam site, so that they are not so far apart.
Yeah. Yeah. The potential of AI is massive, and we're just scratching the surface on it. What's one practical step that you think teams can take to improve the alignment, standardization, or maybe even just the communication around BIM?
The practical steps, that's a good one. I sort of shared the ideas here. Just approach BIM as the enabler of the successful construction rather than just some additional technology that might get in the way, and provide more feedback to the BIM teams. So that's the thing that oftentimes I see lacking. For that reason, there is not enough constructability in BIM products and BIM deliveries. So
What do you think is the most important letter of the BIM acronym?
that's probably building, because it's more related to the actual finished product,
Uh,
since construction in general. So I like term VDC probably better than beam, since like VDC is more wide, it uncovers more what's in there.
mm,
So beam is just like a cluster of different technologies and typically software and some standards about around using this software, while VDC actually connects it to the construction. So which is why I would still say building, because at the end it's how it's getting built and constructed. That's what's important.
yeah, interesting. So as we start to land the plane here, a couple of rapid fire questions for you. First, what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that kind of mean and look like to you?
Creating the proper representation of what you want to get at the very end. So this is why models exist. It's just a copy of something that you want to get it to receive at the end.
Mhm.
So modeling the future in this context would basically mean spending enough time understanding what you want to get at the end in order
Mhm.
to create the proper model for it.
Yeah. So what about innovation? How would you define innovation?
The innovation is connecting the things that are not obvious at the first glance, but when you connect them, you may find that like two plus like one plus one equals three, for instance.
Mhm.
So that's a very important motivation behind innovation, connecting something that's not obvious. And actually, courage is a big part of the innovation too, since it's hard to create something new
Mhm.
without just overstepping some existing barriers. So having the courage to actually combine these things and play with the opportunities. So that's important thing.
Yeah, I like tying it to having the courage to try something new and go be a risk taker. Spot on. How do people find out more information on what you're doing and connect with you?
The best way to do that would be through my LinkedIn. So you can just search Max Bielohurov. You are a we. through LinkedIn, you can have it, and probably you could add a link, I'm not sure, to this. So through LinkedIn, yeah.
Perfect. Final question for you, Max. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry, what would you pick to innovate?
I would pick to innovate the communication and information exchange. Everything that is spread out between different platforms and softwares, so that it's all in a one centralized platform that combines both schedules, both technical requirements, and all the issues all in one place.
Yeah, and interoperability. That's huge. It's awesome. Well, Max, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thanks for having me, Todd. It was nice talking to you.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take, keep it simple to stay aligned. Successful BIM execution relies on simplicity. Overly complex standards and documentation often becomes barriers instead of enablers. Keeping workflows and expectations clear and concise allows everyone, from design to field, to stay on the same page and focus on the outcomes that matter most. Second take, start with communication and education. Establishing open, frequent communication from the beginning, especially with teams that may not be familiar with BIM, is essential. Investing the time to educate and align teams early with tools like shared checklists and frequent touch points sets the foundation for accurate collaboration and long-term success. And finally, relate and involve the field early. True alignment comes from empathy and understanding. Taking time to learn each team's background and how they operate creates trust and buy-in. Most importantly, involving field teams from the start ensures the model is grounded in practical reality, not just theoretical intent, and leads to tools the field will actually use. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group North America, at ASTI.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.